Evening all. Welcome to Arch and Towers on deadline day. An exciting one.
Can't you feel the excitement, mate?
It's palpable.
Absolutely, it's tangible. You can be able to probably feel it through the screen, the power of TV.
Dave Heise here, alongside our chief Norwich City correspondent Paddy Davitt. As usual on deadline day, we like to try and catch up with you guys at some point. So if you've got any questions, comments along the deadline day theme, then please do get them in. We'll be with you for sort of next 25-30 minutes, I would imagine. And we have had some news to kick off with. After a quiet January, Norwich did make a permanent signing today, didn't they?
They did indeed, mate, yeah. And obviously it's all there on pinkman.com now. We've got the opportunity to go down and Michael did, to speak to Philip Heise, which I believe is the correct pronunciation.
Yeah, the Z, isn't it?
Heise, yeah. At Colney yesterday, along with Daniel Farker. And then that was officially announced this morning. Left-sided, as in can play left-back / left midfield, 27-year-old. Pre-contract was agreed with the guy to leave and arrive on a free in the summer from Dynamo Dresden, but they've paid a nominal fee, we think in the region of 6 figures, to facilitate him coming in this window. And I think my take of how that's played out with most fans, I think they feel that's quite a good bit of business, because, and Daniel alluded to this, Jamal Lewis, last man standing as a recognised left back.
Yeah.
So,
well, we saw Ben Godfrey having to play at left back not long ago, didn't we?
Well, we saw further back Sheffield Wednesday away when there was an injury question around Jamal, and we had 2 of the development lads on the bench, didn't we, to thicken out the numbers, and we'll probably maybe get into the homegrown aspect of the whole situation, which hasn't been improved obviously by him coming in the door. But in terms of a guy who's played in the Bundesliga, regular in the second tier, if it's the same impact as Zimmerman, Stiepermann, Leitner, Tribal, what's not to like about it? It looks good business.
And one thing, along with those guys, maybe Stiepermann more than anyone, is that these guys coming across from the German second tier maybe do take a little bit of time to adjust. Hernandez, Leitner, Stiepermann, even Zimmerman. Zimmerman had some shockers, didn't he? And mixed in with some really good games. So perhaps that 6-month period where he's not going to be banging on the door of the first team, or maybe isn't going to be able to expect a place in the starting 11. He's probably going to be on the bench eventually, isn't he? That might just be good for him. It might just ease him in, and eventually, or essentially, he may actually be more of a signing for next season.
Well, absolutely. Well, clearly, in view of it was a pre-contract, they were clearly looking to next season in terms of this guy. But why not? Yeah, why not? I agree. Bring him in, maybe not as a frontline option immediately, but given his versatility, who knows down the stretch, whether it's Jamal's had his issues with his hamstrings in recent weeks. If you can play one further forward, then that brings into play cover for Arnell or Emmy or Todd, in terms of the way they interchange. I don't know anything really about him at all, to be honest, but physically he looks like that won't be an issue. The Championship, he looks a big lad, so that's side
not
of
next
it.
to Zimmerman in the video, but
not next
that's
to him,
tough.
Next to most normal sized people, but so I don't think the physicality aspect, and you would think coming from a German background he will have those technical skills as well. So the question mark is now how soon he can adapt. It's worth pointing out that he's not actually played a game of football since 23rd of December, I think, off the top of my head, because they had the midwinter break, and very strangely they only got back in terms of Bundesliga 2 action in the last couple of days. I think Dresden played last night, actually got beat, and that would have been his first potential game in 5 weeks. So he will take a few games to get up to speed, irrespective of getting back into or adapting to English football. I mean, you've touched on earlier there, mate, didn't you? There was a couple of under-23 opportunities, so possibly you'll see him at that level first. But if he can acclimatise quickly and adapt quickly, then he's definitely an option. But at the risk of repeating what I just said there, if he was to come into an 18, then again it sort of limits the homegrown element of the equation, doesn't it? So, but Farkle must be aware of that, Stuart Webber, because otherwise they wouldn't have done this deal in this window. So they will know what they have to balance in terms of all the competing requirements, but purely in terms of another option who could be ready to come and play his part over the next 3 or 4 months. Yeah, it looks a good bit of business.
Yeah, essentially he's going to be vying with Felix Passlack for a place on the bench, but I mean, I don't think any of us expecting to see him on the bench at Leeds on Saturday, for instance, are we? Or probably the Ipswich game as well. There is another 23s game tomorrow night. They play West Brom at Colney, and then the night after the Ipswich game, the Monday. So what will that be? February 11th. The under-23s play Exeter in the Premier League Cup, so he may feature as an overage player there just to get him up to speed. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I was just digging out the stats which Daniel Farker did mention, I think, didn't he? So I think these are taken from Transfer Market, which is normally pretty reliable. 89 appearances in Bundesliga 2, 22 assists, 7 goals.
Nothing wrong with that output.
So that's not half bad, is it?
Yeah.
He seems to have a very decent left foot. So an interesting addition at the very least, one that was a bit unexpected. It looked like we might even cruise through to 11 o'clock without there being anything particularly exciting to talk about. There have been some young lads, haven't there? We'll come on to that in a little bit, but just to get through some early comments. Ollie Jackson says, hi, Keith Shrekshaw. Hello, boys. Hope you're good. Thanks for joining us, boys. Richard Russell, any firm rumours?
What was the one we just had there?
The Scottish lad we were talking about?
No, I was thinking more the Liverpool lad.
Well, there has just been a little...
Not firm, no. Let's just put that out there. No.
There's a little bit of talk about Ben Woodburn on Twitter, isn't there? Shortly before we fired up the live video, who Liverpool, Wales international, highly rated, but he's only 19, I think, still. First half of the season on loan at Sheffield United and didn't tear up any trees at all. Again, Norwich have been mentioned. There's links there, aren't there?
Yeah.
I think Webber's clearly a fan. May even have been he may have even been signed by Liverpool while Webber was their head of academy recruitment. So we'll see. But we were just talking before we came on. We can't really see how he'd fit in, even if that did come to reality.
No, absolutely no. There were some quotes from Klopp in the last week, I think, saying that it's pointless sending them out if they're not going to play, if they're not going to get game time. And then you get, so basically, reading between the lines, you're getting into the realms of these top Premier League clubs will only allow these players out if there's a guarantee almost of game time. And then it's very hard to see in the areas of the pitch this lad plays that he would elbow out a Timu Puki or a Buendia or Onel Hernandez.
Because he's central ideally, isn't he? He's a striker or a 10.
Yeah.
But I think he ended up playing wide for Sheffield United, and he doesn't really have a pace, does he?
No, so... I don't think we need to worry too much about that. The only reason I flagged that up is because he would obviously tick the homegrown box, and that you feel
Welsh players do, don't they?
Yeah, you would feel that is the one area now in the remaining few hours, which of course wouldn't be the case. To bring it back to the name you mentioned, Fitzpatrick. Because he wouldn't qualify, would he?
He was one that I was keeping an eye on. You guys would probably have seen the rumour mills that we've done. Partick Thistle, youngster, Scotland under-19 winger Aidan Fitzpatrick. Sounded like there was genuine interest in him from Norwich.
There's definite interest, yeah. They definitely like the lad, yeah. But and I've obviously followed up that with a firm bid or two, but unlikely. And then you've got a bit of a development on that today, which suggests it's probably not going to happen.
It might be a bit of amateur detective work, but I noticed on the Pike website about an hour ago they tweeted that they had done some media with Fitzpatrick ahead of their game on Saturday, first team game in the Championship. They are bottom of the Championship in Scotland, so I think he's coming more and more into their thoughts. But Gary Caldwell, the former Wigan manager in charge there, and I think the quote was that it would take an unbelievable bid. So if he's done media today, they're clearly not expecting him to be leaving on deadline night, are they? Otherwise they wouldn't have been doing it. So it looks like that may be one that we can rule out at least until the summer. He's only a young lad, of course. They could come back to it, but the figures being quoted were around 400,000, which does sound quite a lot for an under-23 prospect, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And the reality is probably too much for a lad who's only literally breaking through now. So, but what you do know with Norwich is, and again it's been underlined today with Heise, there was a guy they'd targeted for not this window but next window. So a lot of their work, even in January, and we saw it this time last season, McLean and Wendia. So yeah, it's entirely plausible to me that he's one they could revisit in the summer, or maybe even the windows down the line. But I don't think that's likely. If you piece all the pieces together, I don't think that's going to be a likely one. It's hard to see really at this stage. If we're talking frontline senior types between now and 11, I just don't see any possibility really of anything happening, just because it flies in the face a little bit of certainly how Webber goes about his business on deadline day.
And that's kind of the thing you can bear in mind with a lot of these transfer rumours. For instance, Akinfenwa signed from Luton this week, but this time last year, final day of the January transfer window, rumour appeared, I think it was in the Daily Mail, that Norwich had made a bid then. He was also mentioned in the summer. It wasn't until this transfer window that we find out that he has signed. Under 23 signing, of course, at the moment, but what was playing for Grimsby on loan in League Two. Sounds like he's highly rated, although he seems to have had a few sort of growing pain problems, like literal growing pain problems. So whether he's over them or not, I don't know, because the Grimsby fans didn't seem overly enamoured with him. But he's since emergency signed that his mum is from Norwich.
That's a nice line, yeah.
He's got family links here, so whether that played a part. But my point is that although these rumours pop up now, they may not come to fruition to a little bit further down the line. They're clearly scouting loads of people, aren't they, all the time. So, for instance, one that springs to mind that we had a couple of weeks ago, Matt O'Reilly of Fulham, England under 19 or 20, I can't remember off the top of my head. He's one who was being touted, but he wouldn't be in the first team at Norwich now, and I just wonder whether he's one that maybe it doesn't look like he'll make the breakthrough at Fulham. He's one who could be like an Adam Phillips, who ends up signing in the summer once he's left Fulham. So it's always worth remembering these names, and I've been through them. We've got the live blog going at pinken.com. We've had it throughout the day. Mark Armstrong did a sterling job first half of the day. I've been through all those rumours, so if you want to have a bit of a review, then fill your boots there.
Talking of rumours, we go from St John, Cooper, Pinto to Ipswich, really? Question mark.
Yeah, that's one that's been rumbling around all day, isn't it? But they have made a signing at right back, haven't they? James Bree from Villa, so that's one just to keep an eye on, I think, really, isn't it?
Well, I mean, reading between the lines, clearly the fact they've gone and brought in a right back, they were looking to strengthen in that area, and in terms of the finances, I don't think they would be able to target too ambitiously or cast too wide a net. So if that is your parameters, then why wouldn't Evo Pinto be on it, setting aside maybe or downplaying it a touch, the Ipswich Norwich thing? Makes entire sense, really, if he's looking for some decent right back options who know this division, maybe a little bit of a leadership element to it as well, then why wouldn't you have had Evo Pinto on there? And
I thought they might have struggled to afford his wages initially, but I suppose Evo can't command the sort of wages that he'd be on now anyway, because he hasn't achieved enough to maintain that level of earning, really.
Yeah, and if it was only, if it was done as a loan, then there might be partial parts of the fee, as a lot of these loan deals are structured in terms of the salary element. The club who takes the player on loan doesn't automatically pay the whole amount of their salary, do they? So, but could you see Norwich doing Ipswich any favours in that sense?
No,
I couldn't see it.
And Evo has always pitched himself as sort of a man of the people on social, big time, hasn't he? He's always been a very well liked character. He's a good bloke. We've both spoken to him before, haven't we? And he is a nice guy, but I've equally never been that big a fan of him on the pitch, because he's defensively I just don't think he's up to English standards. Clearly the guy's got great pace. Final ball isn't particularly reliable, but he has had good games for Norwich. He's not always been a liability, but in terms of Ipswich, they've signed James Bree. He's a younger option. They got him on loan from Villa. The only complicating factor, which might just keep this rumbling until 11, but probably not, is that Matthew Pennington is a player Ipswich have on loan from Everton, young defender. Linked today that Derby want him instead, which seems a bit bizarre, because he doesn't seem to have been doing particularly well for Ipswich. They seem to be at fault for quite a few goals. But if he were to go, then maybe that would leave another vacancy that Lambert wants to fill. Yeah. But can you imagine Pinto lining up in the Derby next weekend?
No, I couldn't really see that.
Bizarre,
but then would we have imagined Lambert being in the opposition dugout?
Well, yeah, that's more bizarre, yeah.
don't rule anything out. But I think, for me, I don't think Ipswich clearly can carry a bloated squad in the sense that they've got a lot of options for each position. So the fact that they've brought this lad in from Villa now, I think that probably trail goes cold, really.
Yeah, quite possibly. But we'll see. The be-all and end-all with Evo is that his future isn't here. He's not involved. His contract's up in the summer, so we'll see whether he can get his future sorted before the window slams shut, as it does with the Big Ben bells. Oliver Bensley asks, any chance of a signing like Sibierski this transfer period? An overweight, stroppy Frenchman? Don't think so. They just got rid of a stroppy Portuguese striker, so
well, I mean,
the
only thing that would completely disregard that even possibility, remote as it would seem, would be the finance. I mean, remind me if I'm wrong, DF, but didn't he come in for fairly large wages? Didn't he?
Yeah, he was at Newcastle, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly,
Who were a Prem team at the time.
So, to draw a parallel, if you're looking at Premier League established players on Premier League established wages, even though we just talked about only maybe having to pay part of that, but even a chunk of a Premier League salary would, I think, be way beyond what Norwich would look to do. And in terms of the philosophy, the young, hungry element,
yeah, exactly.
Can't see it.
Like I saw somebody talking about Peter Crouch earlier in the week, and only just sort of pitching it as an idea.
You just reminded me, what was the absolute top draw one we had about 3 hours ago?
Somebody came onto the live blog and suggested Jadon Sancho. You may have heard of him. England international, worth upwards of 50 million at the moment.
Where's he at the minute, Dave?
Borussia Dortmund first team, doing really well.
They're about to go and win the league, aren't they? Deny Bayern Munich.
I think that person had a great idea, but maybe hadn't done their homework. So I think
they've been playing Football Manager all day.
Yeah,
that's what I think.
Even at this stage, we can rule out Jadon Sancho probably ever playing for Norwich, to be perfectly honest, because that guy looks awesome.
But as close as he'll get to Norwich, he's wearing the yellow, I think.
He might play against Norwich at some point, yes.
Possibly.
Carol Mutton asks about Evo Pinto. We've just spoken about that. Here's a good question. James Jeeves Michael Palmer, what's the best January arrival for NCFC in previous windows?
I've got this, mate.
I think I know what you're going to say, but go for it.
Mr. James Madison, who arrived very, very late. Those old windows when we used to be going right to the very, very last few seconds. And I think with Madison, they couldn't get him to Norwich that night, and they had to do his medical at St George's Park. Obviously, he was based in Coventry, so it was a lot easier for him to head up the M6 to Burton. But yeah, that didn't turn out to be too bad a deal in terms of what they paid that night.
About 2.5 million, was it?
Yeah, in total, yeah. And then obviously sold him for considerably more than that, and got that output from him on the pitch last season. So yeah, I'm struggling to find a better all-round, i.e. footballing and financial deal than that.
But a double whammy for you as a Coventry fan, getting the money in the bank, a lovely little sell-on
Not enough
fee
money
as well.
from a Coventry perspective. I think Norwich might have that was David McNally's era.
Yeah.
I think he was a very tough negotiator, and he certainly was on that evening because, to say they undersold him was, but I think they were in financial turmoil, so fair enough, he took advantage.
In terms of value for money, I just don't think you can overlook it. I mean, Tim Closer turned out to be a good January signing, didn't he? But they paid good money for him. Obviously his first season in the Championship, he didn't live up to that price tag because he struggled with the cultural shift, didn't he? But I still think if Tim Closer hadn't have got injured at Crystal Palace in April of the Premier League season, they wouldn't have gone down because he was playing really well, wasn't he, when he arrived from Wolfsburg. So in terms of quality, he was very good. But I mean, Madison, Michael had a nice interview with Zoe Ward, didn't he, earlier this season, and Zoe gave a little bit of the background to how they signed Madison, didn't she? And they literally snuck in at the last minute because Tottenham and Liverpool hadn't made their move. And think how different things could have been if they hadn't have made that move. I mean, he went back on loan to Coventry initially, didn't he? Then on loan to Aberdeen, and then he finally made the breakthrough. And look at him now, helping Leicester to a point at Liverpool. Did you see the header he missed at Anfield?
I didn't turn on until about 20 minutes in. But
got it completely wrong. I think he just sort of misjudged the flight of the ball.
I'll tell you what, though, there was that break in the second half when Damari Gray has just got to play him in, and he would literally have buried that.
He was fuming. Oh, no, they're good mates, aren't they, him and Gray? But he still laid into him, didn't he? So yeah, I think Madison has probably got to be the universal answer, isn't it? Mel Bogan, Jacob Murphy. Sky Sports reporting that he is having a medical at West Brom. We did a poll earlier this week, didn't we, asking whether Norwich fans would be interested in him coming back, and we had about 2,500 votes, and I think it was 61% of people said no, so quite split on that one. I guess the worry would be, if Jacob starts banging in goals, then it could threaten the club that sort of made him.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the good thing is they've played West Brom home and away. Well, in the league anyway. I mean, there's potential for a playoff meeting, but yeah, if it's the Jacob Murphy of the first sort of 6 or 7 months of the season before last, when he was goals and assists superb, then he will definitely have a positive impact on West Brom. He's got big boots to fill though, because Harvey Barnes is doing very well.
He was fantastic, wasn't he? Yeah.
So he's a big loss for him. So
was it 10 goals and 9 assists, or the
phenomenal
other way around?
Output, phenomenal. But what you would say with Jacob is that was the Jacob Murphy who was at the peak of his powers that first 6-7 months of that season with Norwich. This Jacob Murphy is probably feeling a little bit unloved at Newcastle. Hasn't played a lot of football. He was on the bench again the other night. It hasn't worked for him yet at that level. And the fact that Rafa was quite happy to sanction this potential loan move means he's not in his immediate plans up there. So he's not going to be super confident, that's for sure. But, you know, he's certainly got the ability to have an impact for West Brom. And if he was to do that, then, yeah, in all probability, that could be to the detriment of his former club.
Well, Ben Brownsell adds, West Brom seem to be going for it. Johansson and Murphy in on loan from Fulham and Newcastle. I hadn't seen that, but that's Stefan Johansson, isn't it? He was brilliant for them alongside Tom Kearney in midfield as Fulham got promoted last year. So that would be two very good signings.
Yeah, but that underlines the point that Farke's made all through this January. He couches it in terms of there's other clubs with far more financial possibilities, I think was the phrase he liked to use. There you have it. If West Brom can pull those two deals off to bring in two lads, Premier League players on Premier League wages, Norwich can't compete with that. And that's just, unfortunately, why they've had to do it a different way. And so far, they're managing to keep pace. But, you know, down the stretch, maybe that's where the financial muscle of these clubs will tell.
Well, yeah, it's that contrasting style, isn't it? Will Norwich keeping this tight unit together and getting the fit players back involved, your Closers, your Lightners, your Tetties, will that pay off? That's what Daniel's going to have to hope. But, yeah, West Brom got a lot of money. They're still, 4 points behind. They've got a game in hand now, but they've got that replay. We were talking about this on the pod earlier in the week, weren't we? They've got a replay against Brighton, which will be midweek next week, and then they've got to squeeze in a trip to QPR later in the season. So that's not going to be particularly easy. So we'll see how things shape up. But clearly, a win at Leeds on Saturday would make that slightly less relevant.
On that front, I don't know if there's any questions, but Leeds, Bielsa's done his press today.
No one's mentioned that yet, but yeah, he's named his team, isn't he?
Confident, yeah. He's named his 11, not named Norwich's 11, as Mr. Bailey rather amusingly tweeted, given the, well, I was going to say allegations, but I mean, as he admitted to it, then the spying revelations is probably more to the point. But he did say some nice things about Teemu Pukki. He's the man they have to stop, he feels. Yeah. He's a little bit, a lot different to maybe a lot of the strikers you see in the Championship in English football generally. So, yeah, I think it looks like Bielsa, in his meticulous way, has been dreaming up plans to stop Teemu Pukki.
You don't need to be spying on the training ground to work out that Teemu Pukki's
not really, no.
on fire, though, do you? He has been superb this year. Where was the other one? Keith Schreck-Shaw, some lad from Aberdeen, quoted at 5 million, lol, as if. Yeah, that's Scott McKenna, Aberdeen. He's basically Grant Hanley, but in another body. He's Scotland international, very highly rated, but... why would you sign him when you've got Grant Hanley on the bench already, centre back?
Not for 5 million.
They can't even compete at 5 million, can they? And that's been turned down as well for Stoke. So that's one you can completely rule out. Although I think he was on Norwich's radar, wasn't he? They just don't have the money to look at him. I'm sure there are a lot of players on Kieran Scott and Stuart Webber's radar. I just wanted to come back a little bit as well. Neil Luther, hi guys, any outgoings? Not really. I mean, we've already spoken about Evo Pinto, but Tristan Abrahams... young striker, you probably remember, was signed from Leyton Orient 2017. His loan at Exeter wasn't going brilliantly. He was on the bench mainly, so that's been cut short, and he's made a short journey from Devon to Somerset, and he's going to spend the rest of the season with Yeovil instead. And that's the only outgoing. But there was, I mentioned Akin for Maywu, who will go in the under-23 squad from Luton, was on loan with Grimsby, but a couple of other young lads have come in as well. Ghassan Ahadmi, who is a Moroccan 18-year-old, and Cole Lambert, who is from Nottingham, so a bit less exotic, from the Northern Premier Division side, Basford United. That one was confirmed today. Both 18-year-old strikers, both presumably with an eye on the under-23 squad for next year, when you would have thought they'll be looking to get probably Spyro and Ida out on loan, because they're both lads with big potential. So just little side notes there.
But again, you're absolutely spot on. That is clearly the roadmap, and it underlines again, you know, we're sat here a few hours left of the January window. Those deals are not about January, they're about next season's football, and then allowing, as you say, the next level up in terms of development, and either a spy route, then to go out on loan. You know, the connection between what Norwich are doing here, in contrast to maybe some clubs who are a bit more haphazard and rushing players and agents in through the back door, and you know, medicals. It just will not happen under this Webber regime. It's just not the way Norwich do business anymore, and it's probably all the better for it, because if you haven't got a lot of financial clout in the first place, you need to be so diligent in how you spend that, and that's why, you know, even with those 2 youth players, you might immediately think, well, you know, what's that about? That's not for the here and now, but it might, as I say, down the line, make plenty of sense if it allows an Ida or Aspire to go out, get some football in terms of league football, impress then they come back, they're a lot closer to the first team, aren't they?
Absolutely. And with youth football, it's such a process. There are so many players involved with such a low percentage of players who will actually ever get near the first team. There's obviously a slight element of players who have been brought in because they might be worth something to sell on at some point, but Norwich isn't too much of a sort of farm like Chelsea. You know, they don't have 60 players. Although I did the loan 11 this week, didn't I? They're what was it now? I think there's 15 players out on loan.
15.
And there were Giacimi and Morgus were also out, but they got bad injuries. So there had been a lot of loanees. You know, you got Simon Power, Oliveira, of course, scoring on his debut for Bolton.
Ben Marshall.
Check that out, Ben Marshall. That's at Pinkham.com. It's a pretty decent team, actually. I think it probably do a job in League One. But I think that's probably about it for the key lines for deadline day from a Norwich point of view, isn't it, Pad?
Yeah, as we say, I mean, one senior lad in, don't envisage too much else happening, sadly, to disappoint. In terms of outs, possibly Pinto, but even that's probably looking a bit unlikely at this stage of the proceedings. So, yeah, as Farker said, the main thrust of what they were trying to do, keep it a nice tight group, bring it even tighter, and that togetherness will hopefully, as you say, keep them rolling on, starting Saturday at Leeds.
Absolutely. Press conference for that is tomorrow. Mr. Davitt will bring you all the key lines from that. I dare say Mr. Farker might be able to give us a little bit of insight into whether there was anything going on deadline day or not. But of course, that is Stuart Webber's job more than Daniel's, isn't it? Although I'm sure he'll be fully in the loop of everything that's happening. I mean, this is clearly a signing with Heise. It's clearly one that Daniel knew all about as well, isn't it? So.
Maybe just to finish there, Dave. I mean, that is an interesting one. I've seen one or two people joining the dots that, in terms of Farker's contract situation, you know, City fans are still quite anxious to get some confirmation that he is extending his stay beyond his current 2-year deal, which takes him to the end of this season. If they're bringing in lads like that, potentially for the summer window, I think that's a good sign, because clearly Farker would have, as he did with Stiepermann, Vrancic, Leitner, Tribal, he's had more than a passing say in a lot of these players coming in from those markets. So clearly he would have been heavily involved in bringing Heise in. Now, obviously they've got him in January, but he was essentially a summer signing. So Farker's already in thinking about summer and beyond. In terms of his own contractual situation, you'd have to think that's quite a positive step, albeit we still await confirmation.
Absolutely. And the club in recent windows have put out a statement when they've closed the doors, when there's nothing else due to happen. So we'll keep our eyes peeled for that. But the rest of the night, Pinkham.com live blog will be running through until the close of play. And then it's on to tomorrow and building up to Leeds for that big game at Ellen Road. I'm already looking forward to that one. Sold out. It's going to be a cracking atmosphere. Thanks for joining us.